Suspend your disbelief for just a moment and ask yourself, what if everything you were taught about the history of mankind and its origins are not true? What if some of those in power around the world are here to keep the rest of humanity in check and to shield us from certain truths? What if we all have been lied to all these years about an extraterrestrial presence here on Earth and among the stars, and about secret technology that is being kept from the rest of the world, such as free energy that could greatly benefit all of humanity? Is it possible there is a secret space program that is leaps and bounds beyond the traditional NASA programs we all know about? A secret space program where we are already traveling among the stars? And is it possible that we already have secret bases on the Moon and Mars? And what if just some of these truths, some of these so-called conspiracy theories are actually true? Join me and author, broadcaster, investigative reporter, and documentary filmmaker Kerry Cassidy as we explore some of these ideas and see just how deep the rabbit hole may go. Okay, so my guest tonight is Kerry Cassidy, and Kerry is founder of Project Camelot and a broadcaster, documentary filmmaker, and investigative reporter. And for over 15 years now, Kerry's been traveling around the globe, interviewing and documenting testimony of whistleblowers, authors, researchers, and experiencers, and covering issues like the secret space program, black projects, ETs, conspiracies, and more. She is author of the new book, Rebel Gene, Secret Space, and the Future of Humanity. Kerry, thank you so much for joining me on the show tonight.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
It's great to have you, Kerry. And wow, what a fascinating background you have. And going out for all these years and talking to these people about, really when you're talking about whistleblowers, people who have come forward and had the courage to talk about this kind of stuff. And I imagine that was writ with some challenges at times. And you had some stumbling blocks going through that. But if you could take us back, it's always good to kind of hear from my guests how this journey started for them. So maybe if you could take us back to how this kind of all started for you and how you got involved in doing this.
Okay, well, basically, I picked up a consumer grade camcorder and decided to make a UFO documentary. And I was a frustrated filmmaker in Hollywood. I had tried to get a number of projects off the ground as an independent producer. And I wanted to tell the story of UFOs and the ET visitation here on Earth, the fact that we are not alone. As Bob Dean would say, we are not alone and we have never been alone. But so when I picked up the consumer grade camcorder, I went to a certain conference and I started my documentary. I interviewed people like Rich Dolan and Stephen Bassett, Jim Mars, and a few others who were speakers at that conference. And then eventually I got in touch with a guy named Bill Ryan, who was representing the Serpo Project. And he became one of my further interviews for my documentary. And I went to Laughlin, the Laughlin conference, met him in person there. We hit it off. I interviewed him. The interview went very well. And then we decided to keep in touch. Eventually, my mother passed on and I had a small inheritance. I decided to use that to go to Egypt and to also accompany Jordan Maxwell and William Henry on the search for Atlantis in Egypt, as that was a special area of interest of mine. And then on the way back, I stopped in England, and Bill had offered to show me Tintagel and the various stone circles of England. And Tintagel is one of the former homes, said to be, of King Arthur, the whole mystery and mythical story of King Arthur. And we decided to create Project Camelot then and there and basically put our skill sets together. He was a webmaster at the time and a writer, and an executive coach was actually his job. And I was as I say, working on packaging films for Hollywood and reaching a glass ceiling in that way, shooting my documentary and doing some interviews about UFOs and various things. And so that's how I stumbled on Bill. So once we became partners, then we decided to travel the world. I had, as I say, this small inheritance, and that allowed us in the first year or two to actually pay the way. Now we stayed, in cheap hotels, and actually because he lived in England, we were able to drive to Europe. So we drove all around Europe and interviewed key people, had cheap flights, EasyJet, all that. So we were able to do our sort of project on a very low budget and using a consumer grade camcorder. And then we posted those videos, edited videos, onto YouTube. And I was one of the first what's called a YouTube director, as well as a YouTube partner. And at the time, I was unusual because I was able to post 2-hour interviews on YouTube, whereas everyone else had to post only 10 minutes. So that was quite unique, and an opportunity afforded us to really hit the ground running. And we really, I guess, we never looked back. And at that point, we started to garner a huge audience on YouTube that was sitting, waiting for our videos on a month-to-month basis. And eventually, after 3 years of operation, Bill and I separated operations, and he went on to head up a forum. We had started to see things differently. Initially, we agreed on everything, and eventually we kind of disagreed on everything. And so, as will happen with partners. So anyway, then I took over Project Camelot, and I've been doing this now for 16 years. And I began to run out of money. And so eventually we asked for donations. And I also basically decided to broadcast live over YouTube. Initially, I was on radio for 5 years because YouTube wasn't really able to handle live video, or, and even normal videos were challenged. So radio became a format for me in the early days. But as things progressed, I now have like 900 interviews, video interviews on YouTube. So it's a huge channel. We have around 69 million unique viewers worldwide, and 283,000 subscribers on YouTube. And just recently, for the past year, I've been YouTube changed their ways and became very much a sort of censorship, platform, and they started to delete a lot of channels. Luckily, because I'm a YouTube director and came in on the early days and have such a huge channel, I think that has protected me. But at the same time, lately, they've been harassing me more and more, and deleting videos. Just whatever they decide they don't agree with, they delete. And then also they give you a strike on your channel. They lock you out. Right now I'm on lockout from my main channel and have to broadcast through an alternate YouTube that I set up. So these are the kinds of things going on at the moment. So it's been a moving target, if you will, but I continue my work. My website's huge. I have thousands of articles, investigations that I've done, as well as all these interviews.
Wow. Yeah, that's quite a background. And it's unfortunate that, and you hear a lot of that now, a lot of accounts being locked out. Some of it's more on the political side, but you hear of it, and it's unfortunate because, it kind of runs against the grain of the whole free speech thing. Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate to hear that does happen. How did so it's interesting, this secret space program that, I periodically heard about, and the more I've delved into the UFO/ET issue, the more I've heard about it. From the likes of people like David Wilcock, Michael Salla, some of the other researchers out there. And, some may say this is a little bit more on the fringe. Some of the other UFO researchers out there that are kind of more your conventional, if you will, nuts and bolts kind of UFO researchers. How do you kind of address that in your research? Because I know I'm sure you've dealt with it over the many, many years that you've been doing this?
Sure. Well, I mean, I have to say that I don't mind being on the cutting edge. I actually think that's a compliment. And so I'm sort of a no holds barred reporter investigator, and I ask the hard questions of my guests and my interviewees. I I use my own intuition to investigate as well as do what's called triangulation, which is to get three or more people saying the same thing who don't know each other and don't know of each other. And that's the same process that, for example, the CIA will use. And that will basically tell me I'm going in the right direction. And from
Sure.
there, it's just a matter of continuing to do more investigation along any particular route. Um, but I can say that I've also, because we were unusual back in the day, now everyone does the same thing. Everyone interviews people. And a lot of these broadcasters out there are now trying to interview whistleblowers, which was our original platform that no one else was doing at the time. And so I have to say that, because I started out that way, I had these witnesses that were not used to having to answer really direct questions that often. A lot of radio talk show hosts, with the exception of Art Bell, let's say, who Art Bell was one of those unique interviewers who was willing to ask the hard questions and I guess had the clout behind him to be able to do so as well. But I come from Northern California. Grew up in a sort of situation where I was challenging my teachers at a young age, talking back to my parents, and basically causing a certain degree of trouble. Although, I was also widely read. So I've read a huge amount of stuff and continue to do so. I have a very open mind, and I also was not religious. I wasn't brought up in any kind of religious household. I wasn't, we didn't even have a Bible in the house. I had to buy one in order to read it, uh, which I did at a young age, just out of curiosity more than anything else, and so on. So I'm kind of a unique person in that regard. And so it made it so I was always questioning authority, so-called authority. So I didn't see doctors, I still don't, lawyers, you name it. I don't see other people as having authority over me. And that's different than your average person out there. So I come at this from a different way. And I also, I was a journalist in college. So I wrote sort of radical journalist articles investigating and interviewing people even then. So I have that background, and I also studied acting and directing in Hollywood. So you might say I was more than comfortable coming out to the public in a sort of public way, as a YouTube broadcaster and so on.
Interesting. Now, were you an experiencer yourself at a young age? Oftentimes you find that people are either experiencers, they've had strange experiences happen with them that kind of brings them into, whether it's the paranormal or whether it's ufology, any of this kind of unexplained mysteries. Were you an experiencer, and did that kind of help bring you into this?
Yes, I was. I had what I've talked about, and I talk about this in my book. I had a recurring dream at a young age. I think I was around 9, 10, 11, that area. And I would see sort of a path going out from my doorway. There was sort of a white picket fence, and on the other side of the fence was a man with a top hat and a fedora and a top coat. And I would become terrified. There would be a loud buzzing sound, and then I would black out basically. And so that went on and on for many. That was my sort of recurring nightmare. And then eventually I got the courage to actually open the gate and go through it. And when I finally did that consciously, the nightmare stopped. But it was my awareness when I was a kid. I was very sort of psychically open. I was an empath, and I had to actually kind of learn to survive and to. I did start to blank out things like ghosts and too much information coming in, which is what anybody who's young and psychic has to do just to survive. So I knew that there were many other dimensions, and I knew there were other beings from a very young age. It was never a question. So that was just my experience.
Now, I want to talk about the secret space program. Now, a lot of us just know of the NASA space program starting with the Mercury program back in the late 50s, early 60s. Does this secret space program predate that? I mean, what's kind of the genesis of this secret space program, to your knowledge?
Well, there's more than one level. So the bottom line is that in the 1930s, there is evidence out there, and even before that, actually, in the 1800s, and going back even to the pictures from the Bible and earlier days than that. You've seen pictures of UFOs in the sky. They're famous religious paintings with UFOs. You've got angels with these sort of auras and coming out of clouds, all of this. Even what's written into the Bible is all talking about the visitation on Earth of ETs. Now, the secret space program officially probably started somewhere around the 1930s as they were dealing with a lot of issues with the World War I, first of all, and then going into World War II. And the Nazi paperclip program in World War II became when the secret space program really got, let's say, gained in size and became a lot more aggressive, if you will. So it was a progression. There was interaction between Germany and the US going back into the 30s, and the technology. There's also reason, one of my witnesses is William Tompkins, who worked in the Navy at a very young age. He was there in the 1950s, and he was tapped as a child because he began to design ships, large ships, and make incredible drawings and models out of them that were even featured in, I think it was a Macy's store or something at the time. And the secret space program became aware of him and then recruited him, and eventually would design spaceships going interstellar. So the secret space program, he was part of the time when the Nazis were coming in after World War II, and the development from there on. So there are many mixed levels. There's also various UFO crashes that happened in those years, and some are more well documented. I mean, Roswell is obviously one of the most documented crashes, retrievals, as they call them. But there were other ones that happened around the same time, and there were actually ones that happened earlier that haven't necessarily been publicized.
Interesting. Yeah. So, with this secret space program, now, was this, to your knowledge, was this reverse engineered ET technology that really launched this secret space program that no one was really aware of going back? I mean, did the ETs really help us in this program? Because most people are absolutely oblivious, even including myself. I've really only delved into it a little bit, but I mean, did the ETs kind of have a hand in helping us develop this?
Yes. Again, going back I mean, I have so many witnesses and so much testimony on this question, but William Tompkins, because he talks specifically about two groups, the reptilians on the one hand and the Pleiadians on the other, and the way he painted the picture is that both groups were trying to help humans, and helping specifically Nazi Germany, the negative ETs, tapping Nazi Germany, as well as a certain group of Pleiadians who were interested in jump-starting our awareness of them, as since we are related to them. So we both these humanoid type ETs are basically our progenitors, coming all the way from Lyra and then going to the Pleiades, and from there, and they were plundered and interfered with by the reptilians. The reptilians and the Draco are races that have been going around solar systems, and they seek out planets, and they look for food sources. They feed on what is now known as sort of an adrenochrome-like substance that is part of adrenochrome that comes from torturing a human. Specifically, that became an issue with children, and also, taking human slaves off the planet. So all of this is the background, sort of, if you could say, the setting under which we were developing our secret space program. Eisenhower met with several groups of ETs, and they were offering certain deals. In one case, the humanoid Nordic types were offering us reverse engineered technology to help jumpstart our knowledge and our technology. But they wanted us to stop our development of our nuclear program, for one thing, and a couple of other caveats. Eisenhower did not want to do that, so he ended up making the deal with the gray ETs. And there's many kinds of gray type of ETs. We kind of lump them together as knowing one, the traditional, like big-eyed with long skinny arms and all of that. But there are many sort of shapes and sizes, but kind of in this grouping called the gray ETs. And there are both positive races and what we would consider negative. And when you talk about a race being negative, what you really mean is they're not positive towards humanity. They want to eat us, or they want to enslave us and take control of us. So when we talk about that, they have an agenda that is counter to our well-being, so to speak. So we're talking about gray ETs that he made a deal with to reverse engineer various craft. In exchange, they were allowed to abduct a certain number of humans off the planet. Some they would return, and some they would never return. So they would become food or slaves, or used for other purposes. So this is the scenario.
Gosh, that's, I think of David Polides and the
That's
missing
right.
411 work he's done, and the thousands of people that go missing pretty much daily with no explanation. I mean,
Yeah.
of what has happened. No trace of them. Some never return. And it certainly makes you wonder, and all the abductions that are happening. Now, to your knowledge, is there multiple ETs involved in abductions?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of a little known fact that not only are grays abducting, and grays often work for the highest bidder, as it's called. And I have a very key witness called Captain Mark Richards, who came forward much later in Camelot, about 5 years ago, and I've been interviewing him now 12 times. He is a prisoner in Solano, what we might call a political prisoner, or an exo-political prisoner. He is the enemy of the Luciferian Alliance, who is running our government, or has been prior to Trump, and the rest of the world, the Illuminati, etc. So, yes, in answer to your question, there are ET races that are positive and visiting here, coming from not only what we call extraterrestrials, but also from inner Earth, civilizations, and from outside the solar system as well. So we're talking about mantids who used to prey on humans. Whether there are still groups that do, I don't know, but definitely used to be consider us as they considered they were in charge of us, and reptilians doing the same thing, vying for control of Earth and humanity, and also for control of Earth and humanity. So they would be feeding off us. And there are lots of different reptilian species as well. And there is a humanoid reptilian species called the reptoids, who are apparently especially diabolical for some reason. And they have bases here on Earth, and they're particularly dangerous to humans for some, but at the same time, they're also closely related to certain bloodlines.
Interesting. You hear a lot of talk, especially with Trump in office now, and who knows what's going to happen with the election. There's a lot of talk about the deep state draining the swamp, and then you get into the talk about the Illuminati. Are we kind of talking about the same thing when people say the deep state and the Illuminati? Are they kind of one and of the same, or are we talking about different things here?
As far as I'm concerned, they're more or less the same thing. The Illuminati is just a kind of a bucket term for what is in some people call the dark cabal. Others call, as I'm saying, a more technical term, if you will, the Luciferian Alliance. And that is comprised of many races, negatively based races that have, again, want to control Earth. There's a book or a series of books called the Voyager series by Ashiana Dean. I have them on the front page of my Project Camelot website, and highly recommend them if you want to understand the history of the interaction of various ET races and all the different kinds of races, as well as their genetic engineering and interference with our genome, so that we have been interfered with going out throughout our history, which goes much further back than what conventional science will tell you. And I've got witnesses talking about that as well. And this would be a bit of the ancient aliens type thing, but a much more sophisticated treatment, you might say, going back, as I say, eons, but describing the various battles. There have been battles here on Earth that have actually, there was nuclear war, there was Atlantis, and the sinking of Atlantis. So we're going way back beyond what normal historians are willing to do.
Interesting. Now, if we, again, this is along the lines of this ancient alien theory. You hear talk that there were multiple ETs involved ultimately in our creation, in seeding human life here. To your understanding, is that kind of what happened? I mean, are we talking about multiple ETs, multiple aliens who were involved in this Project Earth in humans?
Definitely multiple races. In fact, we started out, my understanding is there was at least 12 involved in contributing their own DNA to what was being made up of this, the vehicle that we now have called, we call human. Human is a man. It actually means man of many hues. In other words, man of many colors. So that's what human means. So we are already a hybrid race from at least the DNA of at least 12 ETs, it's said. And so it's understandable that there are ETs that are also safeguarding this human, they're calling it a human experiment here on planet Earth. There are many humanoid and humans out in the galaxies, many planets. Scientists will tell you that they've discovered so many more Earth-like planets. Really maybe millions of Earth-like planets, they speculate out there. And on those Earth-like planets, they have developed human-type civilizations, again, races that are combining into a humanoid sort of genome, various races with various talents and abilities. And then from there, they also sort of plan on future you might say, mutations of the species. And then you were asking me about the Cabal and the Illuminati and the deep state. So they are bloodline. A lot of them come from certain bloodlines, what we call blue bloods. This goes back to the Anunnaki, specifically the time of the Anunnaki, in which they were interfering with humanity. And that's where you get really the Adam and Eve story and the snake. It's really the interference of the snake and interfering with females, human females, and then creating a next step or next generation version of humanity, and that we contain, all of us, a certain amount of reptilian DNA as a result. But there are certain bloodline families contain concentrations of this, and this is where you get into the whole the Biden family, crime family, as they're calling it, Hunter Biden being accused of molesting children, this adrenochrome obsession with Hollywood and other high level, individuals and families going back, has to do with a reptilian. In other words, there is a predisposition in certain humans to prey upon other humans, because they are not actually the exact same species, even if you want to look at it like that. They have a different version of DNA that has a much heavier reptilian leaning, and reptilians, again, feed on it's exuded from our glands. It's what's known as Kundalini in the east and Orgone on the west. Chi is what the Chinese refer to it as. But yogis are aware of this. This is what they do when they meditate and raise the Kundalini up through the crown chakra and so on. So children have this in abundance. The older you get, past your 20s, you start to lose it. Unless you activate the base chakra and the rest of the chakras, connect them and begin to generate your own Kundalini energy. And when you do that, you sort of gain superpowers in certain ways. You have much more ability to live centuries beyond what we conventionally live at this time, and so on.
Interesting. Now, and there's kind of this effort to kind of squash people's desire to want to learn these kind of extra abilities, if you will. It seems, so this could be more than just trying to hide the truth about extraterrestrials, but also trying to hide the truth about how to tap into these special abilities. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I mean, even this whole idea of gurus from India is part of the cover-up, if you will, unfortunately. Now, you can go and sit at the feet of a guru, but in the end, you're basically thinking that you're dependent upon him the way a Westerner might think they're dependent on their priest to connect them to God. So these abilities are free to everyone. They just simply have to know about them and then know the techniques to activate them. However, the yogis in India, to a large extent, up until you got to the time of Yogananda, who was famous for bringing the techniques of, yoga and other activating techniques to humanity. So he started opening the doors between India and the West, much more so. But they have kept it from the West. It's been common knowledge in the East. It was also very well known in places like China and Indonesia, etc., where, they had Buddhism, and Buddhism was all about also sitting in meditation and raising the Kundalini, although they didn't necessarily talk about it like that.
Interesting. You've obviously interviewed and talked to a lot of whistleblowers. What's one of the most bizarre things that you first heard about from a whistleblower?
Well, I don't know. again, keeping in mind that I had a lot of contact as a kid, I found that most of the information that I had was simply validated to a certain extent by the whistleblowers I interviewed. Um, and I'm sure that that was intentional. But I can say that when Henry Deacon, who came forward under his own name, Arthur Neumann, told us he'd been working on Mars and going through a jump gate, and that he could go there at lunchtime and come back in the same day. That was probably one of the most outrageous things I'd heard. We knew that we had bases on the moon and Mars, but to actually meet someone who had been going back and forth through, you know, he called it a jump room at the time, but you might say it's a jump gate. Uh, in other words, that was probably the most outrageous thing. And for a while, I was a bit skeptical and eventually came to believe that he was telling the truth.
So you had other independent corroboration of that, of what he was talking about there.
Yes, over the years, and Bob Dean also talked about this. But Bob Dean, he was a great whistleblower, but he had a family. One of his family members did die, and this is how they tend to pay back whistleblowers. They will attack someone in the family. They did the same thing to Clifford Stone, who came forward. So it's a common practice to try to attack the sons or daughters of whistleblowers and other family members as well. But so yeah, I mean, there he was also substantiating. There are a lot of, like I say, I'm trying to say is that Bob Dean had to be more limited in what he could reveal. So he revealed a certain amount, and he did a great job, but he wasn't able to go as far as some others.
Interesting. Yeah. So with the, I've read on a couple of occasions, we've had trillions of dollars unaccounted for. I think it was over, and I don't remember the exact amount, but trillions of dollars unaccounted for in the U.S. budget. Trillions. I mean, that's hard to wrap your mind around. Trillions of dollars. And when I've heard that, and I've heard that on a couple of different occasions, I can't help but go back to think to the black programs, the talk about reverse engineering ET technology. Bob Lazar's story came forward. But what's kind of your knowledge of that, of where money's going and how we're maybe reverse engineering this stuff?
Well, I mean, they're deep underground bases. They're actually underground cities, and how they're interfering with those at this time, I'm not even sure. But the bottom line is that a lot of deep projects have been, a lot of the whistleblowers I've been in contact with are reporting from what we call black projects, or above top secret projects. So I guess what I would say is that I'm in touch with also, I have sources. So one of my sources is in a very highly secretive level and a very top level, and he has talked about not trillions but billions. Okay, I mean billions and trillions is more, but you know what I'm saying. In other words, he's talking all the time about this happening on a weekly basis. So it's a lot more than you realize. And I mean, it was Rumsfeld that came forward and said there were 3 trillion missing. But in reality, of course, we're talking about the drug trade. We're talking about trade in human trafficking and various other things like gold, plundering gold and selling it off planet, etc. So there's a huge trade, if you will, including what are called high yield trading programs that are funneling money into the secret space program to make that program viable. And it is run, of course, by military. And on the highest level, certain very high level Illuminati magicians, etc. So this is what I have been told. I have high level sources talking about billions and trillions of dollars on a weekly basis going through and into those programs.
Now, is this primarily the secret space program, us traveling through the solar system? Have they went beyond your knowledge? What have we done so far in terms of traveling through space in our capabilities with the secret space program?
Well, I can say that according to several of my witnesses, we're definitely going in interstellar. So we're leaving this galaxy, we're leaving the solar system. We're going, and by the way, you don't travel conventionally. You're using free energy, even at this point, energy from neutron stars, according to Captain Mark Richards. So we're fueling our craft in amazing ways, but we're also, all of the travel has to do with gates. It has to do with wormholes. So you're going from one place to another in not a straight line, if you will. And that includes going to the moon, by the way.
And it's interesting because you hear talk of, we are flying some of these craft that we've reverse engineered. So, I mean, are a lot of the UFO sightings that we're seeing and a lot of people are seeing nowadays, oftentimes are we seeing our own craft that
Sure.
we've reverse engineered? I mean, is that what a lot of people are seeing in the skies?
Sure, no doubt about it. Even there's some pretty good possibility, at least according to one of my sources, that the Tic Tac UFOs seen off the Nimitz were actually ours, and that was a demonstration more than anything else to show what we had, according to my whistleblower, to China. Whether that's real or not, because it's important to understand that whistleblowers don't always tell you the truth, of course, and I know that. And they are, it's sort of, it depends on what level they're at and where they're at with their own conscience. So what you get a whistleblower is someone who's worked usually for something like 40 years in the secret space program, signed non-disclosure agreements, etc. And then gradually, as they've grown older, become wiser and start to realize that it's wrong that they live at a completely, there's a whole split between the way we live on surface Earth and the way they live in the underground bases and off planet. So understanding that we're not using the technology, we don't have access to the technology that they have access to, that human development on Earth is being sort of stagnated because they're not sharing the technology with the rest of us. And therefore, they'll look at their children and their children's children, and eventually they'll realize that humanity is being shortchanged and that these things should be revealed, the truth should come out, and that we deserve the truth and that we can handle the truth on top of it. They handle the truth, we can handle the truth. And this is the bottom line. So this has been the biggest secret, not to allow humanity to know who they truly are, what our true heritage is, and that we come from the stars in essence, and we will return to the stars, as they say. So this is, yeah, absolutely. The playing field is much larger than we realize, and there are many other beings out there in other galaxies. And there's also an ability to communicate very easily because time-space is all one, and we can cross time and space. And remote viewers have discovered this secret. Signal non-locality, as they talk about this. These are things that are known to scientists at this time. So there's a lot of falsity out there trying to mislead humanity as to where we're really at, how we communicate with each other, even off planet, the limited type of technology they give you or I, for example. If you haven't noticed, for example, when you use YouTube or the technology we're using right now to do this recording, how little it has actually progressed, even in the last, let's say, 10 years, to say nothing of the last 40 years. In other words, we think it's a big deal because we have the internet, but the bottom line is there are technologies that are so much more advanced that we are not being given access to. And it's actually laughable that, for example, I could be on a cell phone and have interference in LA with somebody I'm talking to in Oregon, for example, even to this day. That's laughable. It's, this is, we're constantly dealing, we're dealing with petroleum-based economy to this day. Part of the reason for the COVID lockdown now is to change the entire paradigm to actually to create a different global monetary system so that we won't be dependent on coal and oil, that we will move over to free energy. But the dark side wants to do that once they control every human being. And that's a transhumanist agenda as well. But they mainly want to take down the economies in order to bring up this new so-called economy. But the economy they want to bring forward is very diabolical. On the other hand, Trump and team want to bring forward what is called the quantum financial system on a positive side that will allow for the development and bringing forward of free energy, et cetera. Part of their problem is that governments will lose control of humanity when that happens. And that is a fact. We will not be dependent on leaders, so-called leaders, to tell us what to do, on governments to control us, and so on and so forth. All of this is kind of like the idea that humans need policing, the idea that humans need to be told what to do, that only some humans have the right to tell you what to do, and so forth. So this is a ridiculous paradigm, but it happens to be the one that humans have lived under for so many years. A lot of confusion, a lot of misunderstanding on these levels.
Yeah, and you mentioned the petroleum industry. It certainly seems that the powers that be want to keep that structure in place for at least for the foreseeable future. And this knowledge, people really knew that this free energy existed, and that we harness this technology. It's a major threat to that power structure, and that. So, I mean, do you see this changing anytime soon? I mean, are we hundreds of years away from moving away from fossil fuels? I mean, where do you kind of see that?
Well, it kind of, on a certain level, it's interesting. I'm getting feedback here, but on a certain level, it depends on who wins the election, believe it or not. And even the rest of the world is waiting sort of on pins and needles to see who's going to win this election, and assuming it doesn't get rigged. Okay. Now, every other election has been rigged here in the United States, as well as I'm sure most of the world. But the bottom line is that if Trump and team are truly trying to take down the deep state and the cabal, and the evidence is that they are, the evidence is they have, hundreds of indictments. They have been plundering underground bases and arresting people behind the scenes for torturing children and rescuing the children who have been kept in deplorable conditions underground, etc. This effort, if it continues, will involve, interestingly, of course, Tesla tech. And Tesla tech is free energy. And Trump is actually his relative, I think it was his uncle, who had a relationship with Tesla and who helped to deliver Tesla's technology, as it happens, to the dark side, Illuminati. But nonetheless, they owed that family a debt. And I believe this is how Trump got into power. He also deceived them. So now the question is whether or not he will be able to move forward. And I think a lot of people don't understand that, and it's best to think about it in terms of the Godfathers, movies, if you will. So even the ETs, when we deal with them, they have the ability to decimate our planet. So do we, to kill us all. But the reality is when if we're gone, then they get nothing as well. You know what I'm saying? So there has to be, you know, a mutual agreement. The sides have to come together to agree to a table to agree. And it's in that negotiation that Trump will be, in essence, a master at negotiating and really figuring out what we have to allow for with regard to the dark side, because you cannot kill them all. It's probably physically impossible, but it's also, if you even think about it, because you're not just dealing with the dark side humans, you're dealing with the dark side ET races. So when you're negotiating with the dark side humans, you're also negotiating with the dark side, races. And so the answer in a civilized culture is not to decimate them, and it's not even possible. So from there, you have to work out an agreement of some kind. What those agreements are going to be like, how much we're going to know about those agreements, etc., going forward, especially in the next, let's say, 10 years, I don't know. But I can imagine certain sort of issues that are going to come up, and this is what we're going to have to deal with. So it's time that humans, first and foremost, they have to know that ET is here and dealing with us, and that they're also underground and interdimensional, and that we are dealing with them whether we like it or not. So this is the world we're looking at.
Yeah, it's interesting because we're in a kind of an exciting time. I know there's been some frustration in the UFO community with what's going on with, say, like To the Stars Academy efforts. Some people feel like it's we've already been there and done that, and we're way beyond that, and now they're kind of covering ground that's again, I'm just kind of playing devil's advocate here. Some of them are saying, we've already covered this ground, and here we are saying, we don't know what these things are. We don't know if they're extraterrestrial. And so it kind of begs the question, where do you see that whole effort? I mean, with To the Stars Academy, the Navy videos released, are we getting close to disclosure, or is this going to drag on? I mean, I'm not as optimistic as some about this. It seems like it just drags on forever. Are we any closer to disclosure here?
Well, I dealt with Randy Kramer, who's he's actually a current Marine, and he was at the Yelm conference about, I think it's a year ago. This has been a strange year, but it was over a year ago. So last September, I think it was, we were at that conference, and he came out on stage speaking for the military and telling a very small audience, of which I was one, that they were planning to do a fake alien invasion, the military. The reason for that was to wake people up to the ET presence, to do it in such a way where it demonstrated that we do have adversaries out there, but that in essence, in battles, there had to be fake because they needed to win the battles. So they would stage battles in which, see, we're having battles all the time with ETs on Earth and off Earth right now. And the wars that have been going on, like in Syria, etc., have also been with ET races. And under the cover of war, a lot of stuff has been going on that never gets reported. So if you extend that into a so-called fake alien invasion, there's evidence coming forward, not only through Randy Kramer, but other people at this time saying that's still in the cards, that may actually manifest sometime, even if Trump's in office, sometime in this year. When I mean, this coming year, next year, I guess 2021. Uh, when Randy made his statement, it was September of 2019. Okay. And he said they're going to do it within 3 years. So technically, 2019, 2020, 2021. So in other words, we're getting closer to the so-called deadline, if that's accurate. Uh, and this is the kind of thing. So at the same time that there will be a revealing of sort of a fake alien invasion, what they will really do is work in revealing some of the real aliens and eventually, hopefully, raise the awareness on planet Earth, doing it through a sort of a wartime atmosphere. Now, in the same, it's important to know that the Illuminati, with the whole COVID thing and everything they're doing, has an agenda, and it's got, it's a very long agenda going back centuries, but it involves certain key items that they're looking forward in the future to revealing and bringing forward, and in essence, that involves things like earth changes, ongoing weather wars. These are the things that Trump and his administration have to deal with, so that if Iran has technology from a group of ETs, or China has technology from a group of ETs that one-ups the technology that we, the American military, has, this becomes a huge threat. So this is the kind of thing we're dealing with. We're not dealing with like a closed system. We're dealing with an open system here on Earth that is dealing with all these other incoming races, some of whom just are observing, some just want to plunder certain items, some want to take humans, etc. And some are here to protect us as well. So it's a huge playing field. And when you wrap all that in and you understand that if they try to stage this so-called fake alien invasion, the real ETs, it's also their playing field, so they can come out and reveal whatever they want at the same, in a certain sense. It's like if you can think of it, in wartime we have this thing called détente. During détente, everyone agrees not to do anything, supposedly, but then once détente is over, it's a free-for-all. So what you're really looking at is a possible free-for-all in the future, should they attempt this. No longer will races keep themselves quiet. Now, my understanding is that various races do not want to keep their presence and their visitation to Earth hidden. In fact, they want to do business with us. There are entrepreneurial, believe it or not, races that actually come from other planets that want to trade, obviously. One of the things we do here on Earth is make chocolate. I know it sounds silly, but it is actually an aphrodisiac, and it's highly prized by other off-planet races, at least according to Captain Mark Richards. And there are other things that we do as humans, crafts, arts, various things that we do that are highly prized as well.
Yeah, I just want to have one more question before we wrap up here. To your knowledge, do you believe some presidents have actually been locked out of the ET issue and have not been told the truth?
Yes, I do. But unlike Grant Cameron, who I think is wrong on several counts in this regard, I do know that a number of presidents that have been read in, and I know that Trump is fully read in, for example. So it's different than most people understand, and certainly Kennedy was fully read in, and so was Nixon, by the way. So there are definitely important presidents that were read in, and this changes the playing field. It also is one of the reasons why Kennedy got killed and Nixon deposed, okay, is because of their knowledge of the ET situation and the desire of the deep state, what was already developed into the deep state at that time, to basically silence them about this issue, because once this gets, again, revealed, they lose a tremendous amount of power. Knowledge is power. So it's one thing to have information. It's another thing to take the information and create knowledge from it and then wisdom. So we're moving along that sort of, we're an information highway, if you will. But more and more people like me and other courageous souls are taking and adding 2 plus 2. So they just don't take the information and let it float out there, with no connection. It's understanding the connections between one thing and another that leads you to understand the through line and the real story as to what's really going on here on planet Earth. And so that's a big part of my job.
Thank you for sharing that. Now, Kerry, can you please share with us where people can find your work, your book, the other work that you do?
Sure. So my book is available on Amazon. It's also, I've tried to, Amazon gives you a choice of countries, and I tried to make all the countries have my book available on their websites, etc. And I've heard someone from South Africa saying they're having trouble getting my ebook for some reason, I think they said, and that the because of the shipping rates on Amazon and all this kind of thing, the paperback is difficult to get on top of it. So I just want to say my understanding is the UK, Amazon.co.uk is a good place to go to get my book. Especially if you're international. Of course, if you're in the US, you get it at Amazon.com. It's linked on the front page of Project Camelot. So my website is projectcamelot.tv, projectcamelot.org, or projectcamelotportal.com. All 3 URLs go to the same place. We created 3 URLs because we found out 1 or 2 of our URLs were being blocked in certain key countries. So this is so that doesn't happen. And I have a YouTube channel. If you just put Project Camelot into the search term on YouTube, you should find it that way, or just go to my website and you'll see a link to my YouTube channel. As I say, more and more of my videos are not visible on YouTube as much. They're on my website. And the website links for my show, even after I do a live show, will stay. So those links will not change, but we will re-embed the show. If we have to take it off YouTube, or if they delete it, then we put it on places like BitChute. We embed it into our page, or wherever else I can get it loaded up. So this is the process we're going through at this time. I do appreciate anyone who will subscribe. It's very cheap, $3 a month, price of a latte, or even less than that. And that's for a year subscription, or $5 a month for month to month. So hopefully you consider my work worthwhile, and you are willing to help subscribe and keep us going. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Kerry. I really appreciate you joining me tonight. Interesting stuff. Really enjoyed the discussion. Have a great night, and we'll have to get on there and check out Project Camelot.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.